Call of Duty and the World War II theme are something that I find go hand in hand with each other. Whether or not people like the setting, it's where the series got its start. And even though the Modern Warfare and Black Ops series will always be the most popular sub-series, both holding a lot of the responsibility for driving the series into the spotlight, I have to at least commend Sledgehammer Games for trying to appeal to people who were fans of the series' roots. And I'll just straight up say it too. I don't think that Call of Duty World War II was a terrible game either. It wasn't exactly the best, but it was nowhere close to being the worst. But I'll be honest, I think the game had some positive aspects to it. The story was alright and the gameplay was mostly fine. There was some cool stuff to it too, like members in the platoon having their own unique things to benefit the player. So honestly, I felt there was enough there to justify Sledgehammer to continue with the World War II theme, since it felt like they were kind of on the cusp of something solid. However, the company would inevitably be led into a rebuilding process, with Sledgehammer Games founders Glenn Schofield and Michael Condrey leaving the studio in 2018, with the company's first game after their departure being Call of Duty Vanguard. Call of Duty Vanguard would release on November 5th, 2021 on the PS4, the PS5, Xbox One, Series X/X, and Windows. The game would release to okay enough scores, with most criticism being towards the lack of innovation and being World War II themed. Even then, however, the game would still receive nominations for a number of awards for things like animation and art direction, and also take home an award for outstanding visual effects. Vanguard would also mark a return of zombies with its own storyline here. It's zombies. Nothing really to say here. If you played the other games and mess around with it, you'll pretty much know what to expect. It's fine. I don't mind it. I really thought it was okay, but nothing I'm gonna go into too much depth with. I'll quickly gloss over a few extra bits as well, since it's worth mentioning the game would also have a number of multiplayer collabs. These included cosmetic tie-ins for Godzilla, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and another with Snoop Dogg. Vanguard wouldn't really have a lot to offer on the different editions, but I'll point some of it out. The game had a standard, a cross-gen bundle, and an ultimate edition. It shouldn't be a surprise that the standard edition was just the game, but the cross-gen bundle would essentially allow buyers to access either the respective PS4 or PS5 version and the Xbox One and Series XX versions. And finally, the ultimate edition gave players the Task Force 1 pack, which included 3 operator skins and 3 weapon blueprints with tracer rounds. It also included the Battle Pass bundle for the Season 1 Battle Pass with 20 tier skips, and 10 hours of double XP with 5 for just XP and 5 for double weapons XP for both Vanguard and Warzone. Outside of early access to the Vanguard beta, those who pre-ordered the game would also receive the Night Raid Mastercraft weapon blueprint for usage in Black Ops Cold War and Warzone, and also the Frontline Weapons pack. This included 2 weapon blueprints. In addition to all that, those who pre-ordered would also receive the main protagonist of the game, Arthur Kinsley, as an operator online as well. So anyways, let's get into our recap of Call of Duty Vanguard, shall we? If you don't want to hear any of this mumbo jumbo, here's a timestamp that you could skip to. So in Call of Duty Vanguard, we're essentially swapping around between characters, with each person having their own story to tell. That being said, we have multiple protagonists throughout the campaign, essentially being presented in a non-linear fashion, meaning we jump back and forth with characters recalling the past with some cutscenes that show them in the game's present time as well. With that in mind, Vanguard begins with a cutscene of main protagonist Arthur Kinsley giving some backstory about how the SOE had recruited a team under his command to retrieve files on something called Project Phoenix from Nazi Germany, and that this was supposed to be their first and only mission, as we get superimposed text of Hamburg 1945, as we see our protagonist jump onto a train with the intentions of hijacking it. In the beginning, we play as a dude named Milos Novak as we head up the train with our team, eventually making it to this point where we gotta make a jump for it. This leads to a cutscene where Arthur explains that they're there to nab files on Project Phoenix.
All we have is a name. Phoenix.
Oh, so we got no idea what we're up against.
That's the mission. To find out. SOE says the Krauts are moving something big out of Germany. Could be a document stash. The holiest of holies. We are here to pinch it.
If this is so important, why did they not send an army?
They did. There's 6 of us.
So after the train stops, we find ourselves at a rail yard where we continue on to infiltrate a U-boat base. Once inside, we find a command room, inspecting some documents where we toss some files on Project Phoenix as we overlook some people moving a crate onto a submarine.
I bet you London to a brick that is what we're after.
So what are we waiting for?
Time to bring the heavy stuff. Now we're talking.
Wait. We can't go in loud.
Arthur?
Whatever's in those papers is the best kept secret in the Third Reich. And the Krauts kept them here, in the arse end of nowhere.
So what?
It makes no sense. It's like leaving the crown jewels on the front porch.
With hardly anyone watching them. The entire German army should be guarding this place.
We're not the only ones who don't know what Phoenix is.
You're saying Nazis are keeping secrets from Nazis?
I'm saying the ones in charge of the secrets are the most dangerous.
After learning there's something more going on here, this leads us going on to secure Phoenix intelligence. We make it to the sub, heading inside to search for the crate, eventually finding it. However, as we attempt to take it out of there, we're hit with a flash as we see that we've been captured with a conversation between Arthur and this dude named Hermann Freisinger.
We thrashed you once. Hear those bombs? That's us, thrashing you again.
Thrashing. Thrashing. What an interesting choice of words.
I told you already. Get on with it.
Yes. That's what you want. To sacrifice yourself. To be a leader. I am not here to give you what you want. Quite the contrary.
So Novak gets killed here, and then we see this scene with the remaining members of the team being driven off in the back of a truck, minus one of them, Wade Jackson, who they say had abandoned them, with Paulina, the girl in the group, saying that she has a history with Freisinger and that he's gonna kill them all. This leads to a dude named Richard saying that Arthur will get them out of this situation, as the scene switches to a plane with Arthur talking about leading.
If you're meant to lead, you have to learn what it's like to lose men. To have them die trusting you. And there's only one way to learn that lesson. First time I did was on D-Day.
All right, lads, listen up. We've got until dawn to achieve our objective. And it seems like the Krauts already know we're coming. Now we've got one chance to demolish the coastal artillery. But if we don't, the invasion tomorrow will fail. Now I trained you all for this. Let's not let the Navy show us up. So take the casemates, blast the artillery, and fire your flares to let the Navy know the job's done. All right, this is it. You know the drill. Stand up! Hook in! Stand by! See you on the ground!
So this part has us playing as Arthur, who parachutes out into some water as we begin Operation Tonga, with the main objective of the mission being to destroy coastal defenses as we go on to regroup with our allies at a windmill. Once there, we help out our allies, reuniting with our platoon.
Nice to see you, gents. Where do we stand?
Captain didn't make it, so we're on our own now. I say we dig in and wait for the rest of the 6th Airborne to assemble.
Henry said we have till dawn to destroy the artillery. If we don't, the invasion fails.
So you fancy yourself the captain now?
Sunup's an hour away at best. There's no time for a sit-down.
Yeah, there's also no muscle and no cavalry coming to save the bloody day. The only thing we can do here is to die or try not to.
Hey, you two scrapping over who's got the bigger bollocks ain't gonna solve nothing.
Those German casemates aren't that far away. I think we can get to them in time. So I say we take them out.
The company's scattered. We're pissing in the wind at this point.
You know what's at stake. You all do.
This is madness.
Hey, we're beyond madness. Look, I'm with Arthur. We finished the mission.
All right, Kingsley. Looks like you're in charge now.
So learning that their captain didn't make it, Arthur's designated leader as the group goes on to finish the mission by destroying a gun battery. But first, we gotta take out a bridgehead. After which, heading onto the back of a truck where we see yet another cutscene with Arthur essentially saying here that sometimes being crazy is necessary, with him and Richard being cut from the same cloth. This continues with Arthur and Richard preparing to assault the gun battery by overlooking and coming up with a plan to take out the gun batteries. Arthur then gives Richard a flare gun, telling him to use it so that they don't get blasted by ally ships once they've taken the gun batteries out. Arthur then jumps into a truck to clear a way through the enemy minefield, jumping out with the truck going boom, which leads them going on to help break outer defenses as they charge in. Not long after, however,
Ready on the door, just waiting on you, boss.
You take the lowercase, mates. I'll take the upper ones. Don't forget the flare.
Let's move up.
As such. All right, boys, this is it. You're on me.
Tommy!
so poor Thomas here gets his head blown off. R.I.P. Anyways, they go on after this to reach the upper casemates, going on to destroy gun battery cannons. So once they're taken out, we go to fire a flare to stop a Navy bombardment. However, Arthur's flare malfunctions, which leads us needing to find Richard to grab his flare. Arthur goes on, finding Richard in rough shape, and then grabs his flare from him to signal the Navy, finishing the mission with Arthur saying that completing the mission honored the fallen. This goes on to another scene with Arthur explaining that Freisinger killed Novak and gave them a free ride into the Lion's Den. We see Freisinger asking a dude named Yannick Richter to find out everything about Arthur's unit when we switch to them being brought to a cell with Richter confronting them, with Arthur speaking up saying that he's the leader of the group, which leads to him being taken away to be interrogated. At this point, Arthur explains that he's gonna kill Richter and that they were being held in the basement of Gestapo headquarters, and that intelligence on Project Phoenix had to be there somewhere. The scene then goes on to Freisinger taking a phone call saying that allies know about Phoenix, and that they have a traitor, with Richter entering shortly after to tell Freisinger that Arthur was the leader, which they presume was an act of desperation from the allies. Richter also says that Arthur explains that their sixth man, which would have been Wade Jackson, was dead. Freisinger then ponders if there's other teams similar to this one, with him counting on Richter to find out more information. We then see a cut back to Arthur being taken back to the cell, where he explains to the others that the Nazis know about Wade. However, he hasn't been caught just yet. Richter then comes out of nowhere and asks for Paulina, who gets taken away. This leads to a scene showing backstory on Paulina, with the superimposed text saying that we're now in Stalingrad 1942, with us seeing a conversation between Paulina and her father Boris, who explains that glory means nothing if you're dead, as we begin the Stalingrad section with Paulina's brother Misha carrying some empty bottles saying that they're gonna be for Molotovs, with Paulina spending time with her family as they have a little breakfast. Misha then makes his exit, leaving his box of bottles behind. This leads to Paulina having to take the bottles to him. So after she does this, Paulina then heads off to report to the medical corps. However, the place gets attacked, which leads to Paulina having to rush home. Along the way, however, she's knocked out. Once she comes to, she goes on, seeing that the place is overran with German soldiers, one of which tells her to go back inside of an apartment, where Paulina goes on and grabs a knife, stabbing a dude and then continuing on. Paulina makes it to her home, finding her father's rifle, and then uses it to drop some soldiers. After this, she goes on to her father. Unfortunately, however, he dies in front of her. This leads to Paulina then going on to find her brother Misha in a post office while avoiding a tank column along the way by doing a little crawling. But anyways, after Paulina successfully makes it to the post office, she ends up needing to save Misha by dropping some dudes and clearing the area. Once this is done, she frees Misha, telling him that their father's dead as they go on to plan their escape, with Paulina going on to climb the roof of the post office to cover the partisans and create a diversion so that Misha and the others can escape. Eventually, an ambush occurs and then Paulina rushes to Misha after, successfully getting away from the enemy. This is followed by a scene with narration from Arthur with him saying that Paulina was the deadliest member on their team. The scene then goes on to Paulina being interrogated by Richter, who says that Paulina wasn't even able to save the life of her father, and that all he needs is her screams to get the others to talk as he grabs her and bashes her head into the table. Paulina says Freisinger's the only thing worth talking about here, telling Richter to get him to confirm her story, and then Paulina gets taken back to the cell. We then get a cut to Richter on a phone asking for records about a Commander Steiner and photographs of a Russian sniper named Lady Nightingale, with Freisinger coming into the room, interrupting the call. Richter tells Freisinger here that he's discovered that the 6th ally was dead. However, this claim ends up being false, as Freisinger gives Richter a file showing an arrested American who is being brought there to be interrogated. We then switch back to Paulina being brought to the cell, who says that she told the same lies as Arthur. The group then has a little chatter about what they're gonna do when they get out of there, when we switch to Wade, who's getting interrogated by Richter, who tries to get information out of him about a plane that he tried to steal. This is when we switch to Arthur talking about Wade at Midway, as we see this cutscene go on to a briefing, with a win here meaning the Allies will take the Pacific.
This win will give us the Pacific. Now go out there and get the carriers.
As if this operation wasn't hard enough. Now the entire war's on the line?
Relax, Hernandez. I was born for this.
Not too sure I was. Vamos, Jackson.
So Wade follows Mateo to a plane, and then they go to take off. This section is essentially following our squad and protecting them while making some dive bomb runs on carriers. So after we go on and stop a counterattack and then go on to bomb a second carrier, we see this big old boom with Arthur narrating that Wade was one of the war's greatest pilots. This is then followed by Wade being tossed into the same cell as the others. Richter then says Arthur lied to him, which upsets him enough to execute Richard. So after this, we move on to a scene with Freisinger saying that Hitler was dead. Richter then tells Freisinger that Wade was the sixth man and that he believes that he'd finally broken them. However, Freisinger deems Richter to be non-essential as he tells a guard to come forward, with Richter now panicked, saying that he'll get Freisinger what he needs. Basically, Freisinger gives him a chance here as we switch back to our group in the cell. Jackson goes on from here saying that he tried getting a plane, but by the time that he got there, they're already locked up. He goes on to say that he had also planted a bomb, but they got an hour before the wall blows up. We see a little argument between the group here, and then Arthur says that they can trust Wade. This leads to us seeing a scene of Bougainville 1943 with Wade and Mateo flying around taking out planes when they get hit and end up crash landing. This starts the level Numa Numa Trail, where we see the downed plane with Wade impaled by some metal. Mateo gets him out of the wreck and then drags him out of there, taking Wade's gun as he goes to find out where they are and then covering him with some leaves before, well, leaving, with Wade passing out shortly after. When he comes to, he discovers that the enemy is searching the downed plane, which leads him sneaking out of the area to search for Mateo. Along the way, Wade attempts to radio for help with no response. He continues on with his search, finding and firing a flare gun, eventually finding Mateo when the two get captured by the enemy.
Do you speak Japanese?
So Mateo and Wade end up being saved by the 93rd Infantry Division, with a dude named Booker Washington giving Wade a gun and having both Mateo and him tag along. Eventually, we hit this area with a bridge and end up having to take a sniper out, sneaking along to kill the dude. After doing this, we learn from Booker that they're there to help the 23rd take the island and that there's a nearby base. Therefore, we gotta take a ridge and clear the base. So once we get to the ridge, Booker tells us that we need to cover a dude named Howard as we go across a field of barbed wire. When it looks like we're about to be in the clear, however,
not bad. Fly, boy.
God damn it! I can take that for you.
so Howard gets killed and Jackson ends up taking his flamethrower, which leads to Jackson being tasked with the responsibility of torching the enemy as the group goes and takes out some guns when a flare is signaled to call in the rest of Booker's men. Booker then has Jackson look through some binoculars, seeing tanks roll in and a hangar with a plane inside. This leads to them moving out to go and steal it, moving up with some tanks. So once we get to the plane, we're given a gun to cover Washington and his men as they push the plane while we defend it. After this, Jackson Jackson takes off and the level ends with this cutscene where we see Jackson helping out the 93rd, with Arthur narrating that the men of the 93rd changed Wade by showing him what war looked like from the ground, and that the only way to win was to have each other's backs. We then switch back to the group in the cell with Paulina saying that Wade had abandoned them in Hamburg. However, Arthur says that they need to focus on getting out of there. Paulina then gives Arthur a knife, which gives him an idea of putting on a show for Richter. We then see Paulina being taken into Richter for interrogation. Richter then confronts Paulina about her identity of Lady Nightingale, asking what the team's planning as we switch to Stalingrad in 1943, being told that Germany had underestimated Russia, with people looking at Paulina as a symbol of hope. However, she only cared about getting vengeance. When we begin playing in the Lady Nightingale level, we see Misha and Paulina overlooking the commercial district of the city, where we learn about a dude named Steiner creeping around there. We also see that a dude stuck on some barbed wire here had gotten taken out by a sniper. This leads to them going around to find a path to Steiner. We eventually hit this point where we see Steiner as Misha rushes in, leading us to need to take some snipers out. After this, we go on to pursue Steiner, getting our eyes on him when Misha gets shot. This causes us to need to carry Misha with us, getting to this point where we're drilled with an explosion and knocked below ground.
Misha!
Where? Stop it. Don't let him take Stalin.
This knife isn't going to get us out of here. Look, we need to...
Finish it. Please, for all of us.
No, you're delirious. Come on, we have to move.
Paulina, go!
No! You cover the opening. I go out and flank them.
There is no time. Go. I will slow them down.
Дурачок.
Сплячка. Now go. It's all right. Go!
So Misha sacrifices himself here so that Paulina can get out as she goes on crawling through some rubble. Continuing on, Paulina overhears Steiner calling out, saying that he knows she's there.
You will not get away this time, little bird.
So Paulina goes on with her pursuit, ascending the building in her search. Once at the top, there's a point where an enemy grabs and knocks her down the building, which leads to Paulina needing to drop some soldiers. After this, Paulina once again ascends the building. However, she's shot at, which causes her to drop her rifle. Now unarmed, she heads on, eventually landing in this room where she needs to fight Steiner by poking him with her knife a few times. Once enough damage is done, Steiner runs away with Paulina following his trail.
All you've left me is this knife.
I could help you.
Incredible. You're all the same.
So Paulina kills Steiner and knocks his body down, with a cutscene that follows with the narrating Arthur saying that Paulina's actions inspired Russians to take action and push their invaders out of Russia, and that these feats were what led to her being recruited. After this, the scene goes back to Richter interrogating Paulina, who asks what Freisinger would want with a lowly officer. Paulina responds by saying that Freisinger was recruiting people for a special project and that she was sent to kill the dude. We then switch back to our crew in the cell, with Richter saying there's no way out of there unless they spill the beans. This prompts Lucas to take the opportunity to betray the group as he's taken away for interrogation. Lucas pretty much says here that he was expendable as the scene goes to Tobruk, 1941. This scene has some initial narration from Arthur, who says that Lucas was a skilled demolitionist here. We also learn about the rats of Tobruk as we see the group here playing cards when they're interrupted by this dude named Hams. We then go on to follow this dude Dez to an ambush site. Hams sets off some explosives here, and then we go on an attack, clearing a convoy and then going on to check some wreckage.
Get out of truck! He's tired. Didn't get very far.
This was a
simple raid, and half the supplies we wanted have gone up in smoke.
Sir, there's still one truck down the ridge.
Well, then take some rats and get after them, Jacobs.
So we see this dude Bluey get stabbed by a survivor who ends up running away. This leads us going with Des and a dude named Robert Jacobs to search for the survivors, finding a crashed truck and then continuing on where we discover and clear an outpost. Once this is done, Lucas searches the outpost, finding a map which we see shows a camp in the area, one that we're gonna check out. We continue on from here, avoiding enemies in the desert and up to this area where we end up in a tent that they end up investigating. While there, Des notices the enemy outside with lots of stuff to blow up. This leads to us going on to, well, blow stuff up. Once we boom everything, we regroup when we hear a plane flying overhead. This causes us to need to take the thing down while enemies rush in and attack. Once it's done,
On the coast of Italian Libya, an Australian private and a group of rats had given Rommel a huge black eye. Their action should have earned them medals, and maybe even a shred of respect.
so they take out the plane, and we overhear Arthur narrating that all Richter seemed to care about was Rommel and his connection to Freisinger. The scene then cuts to Richter and Lucas, where we hear a loudspeaker message stating the city defenses were breached and for people to evacuate. Richter then asks Lucas what Freisinger wanted with Rommel, which is followed by some more narration, with Arthur explaining that Lucas didn't need to say anything more than what Richter already told himself, as we're brought to El Alamein, 1942. In the introduction of this level, we hear a speech from Henry Hams about defending liberty in England as our crew chills on the back of a tank.
What's he saying, Jacobs? Oh, he's personally thanking you and Des for being stand-up chaps.
It's stuffed.
It's king and country. It's always king and country. Bloody hell, is that what I think it is? Where'd you swipe that from?
Found it lying around.
If he catches you with that, you're a dead man.
I'll drink to that.
So after this, we're ambushed by the Axis, causing us to have to fight, pushing on and eliminating some mortar crews as well. Once we're done here, we go to join Hams on the front line, following Jacobs through some trenches to regroup with our squad. Once we're with them, we advance through the battlefield, clearing out enemies in a trench. After this, we go on to pursue retreating forces when we get a cutscene where we're knocked out by an explosion. Surviving this, Des pulls us out of the chaos where we go on seeing Hams grilling the dudes, saying that we're gonna hold the line. However, Des says we need to take out some flat cannons or there won't be any line. This leads to Lucas saying that they're gonna ignore Ham's orders and take the hill, with Jacobs giving Des a flare gun so that he'll know to radio their bombers. So after this, we follow Des going on to clear the flat guns. Once this is done, Des says that when he fires the flare, enemies will swarm them, which means that they'll need to hold off the enemies till their bombers arrive. But anyways, Des fires the flare and they enjoy a drink as the enemies rush in, leading us to need to go on the defense. After we successfully thwart the enemy, we see bombers fly in. However, we learn that Des was killed. So this scene is followed by narration, with Arthur explaining that finishing a mission is a way to honor the fallen, and that Lucas's flaws were what made him perfect for his team. This scene is followed by us going back to Richter and Lucas, with Arthur explaining that Lucas was able to distract Richter enough to cause him to doubt everything that he knew.
Are you alright, mate? You're looking a little bit pastier than usual.
Please. This was never about winning the war. This was never about winning the war. This was a coup. This was a coup. Tempelhof. That's how he's getting them out. Taking the Reich underground.
So after learning that Freisinger was going to take the Reich underground without him, Richter says that he was going to use Lady Nightingale for a safe passage, and then Lucas tosses a knife at a guard, knocking Richter to the ground as he's able to free himself. This is followed by a scene with Freisinger saying that Project Phoenix will succeed, and from the ashes will rise something greater for the Fourth Reich. We then go back to our crew as Lucas tosses Richter into the cell with the group. Arthur then stabs Richter as they all make their escape, with Richter dying in the cell. As they go to leave, Lucas explains the situation about the Reich being taken underground, and that Freisinger and the others are going to be getting out at Tempelhof Airport, which means we're going there to get them. This leads to the level of the Fourth Reich as we go through some tunnels chasing after Freisinger in a car. It's worth mentioning that in this level, we end up having to switch around between all the characters during certain sections, with us initially starting as Arthur. But anyways, after a little time, we end up needing to abandon our car and follow Freisinger on foot, eventually seeing that Freisinger left behind his car on foot too. We continue on, fighting to this point where we switch to Paulina to clear some gunners in a courtyard after Arthur's knocked to the ground. So we go clear the place, switching to Lucas after, who goes on clearing tanks and then blowing them an entrance to continue forward. We then end up switching to Wade here as we go on to reach the airfield, with Wade about to get stabbed when we see the scene of our crew dropping dudes. This has us switching back to Arthur again as we once again continue on after Freisinger to capture him.
It's over!
You cannot kill me.
And yet here we are.
And even the Allies would leave their decision to inferiors such as yourself.
We need him alive, boss. The intel he's got's what we came for.
Hey, shoot him or bring him. I'm starting this plane.
He'll never talk.
Get up!
The nations will make sure I'm well taken care of. As payment for my cooperation. A peaceful new beginning. A life of American luxury. Might suit me. Perhaps I might even start a new family.
Not for you. There is no starting over. This is your new beginning. Fascistkaya Svinya.
Do you even know who I am? The value I can provide?
You're not worth it.
So Freisinger's burned to death here, and then our crew goes to leave with one last scene showing the Nazis had operations all across the world.
Come on, dig in.
How about this? Project Nova.
I can beat it. Project Ether. Reviving the dead.
Does anyone want some Nazi gold?
Looks like we're going to be busy. Keep going. Open them all.
Here you are. I was about to try this autopilot and come back. What's Project Aggregate?
Secret V2 rocket facility. You think you could fly one of those?
I can fly anything.
And with that, we reach the end of Call of Duty Vanguard. Summarizing my thoughts on Call of Duty Vanguard, I don't know about this one, man. It definitely feels like a step back from Call of Duty World War II, which is hard to believe. Like, the story's okay, but something about the gameplay feels a little slow. It took me a while to get used to the speed of the game after coming off, like, I don't know, insert any Call of Duty here. I mean, when I was going through the second mission of the game, everything felt insanely clunky. Even things that I was able to praise in Call of Duty World War II, like the sniping, just didn't feel fantastic here. I did at least like parts of the story. There was some intrigue here with the whole group of soldiers from different countries being brought together, though I'm not entirely sure if I liked the way the story was presented. See, we get a bunch of time jumps so missions aren't in chronological order. We just kind of jump around back and forth. It's whatever. There's some missions that I thought were at least kind of fun, and some that I thought were dreadful. I'll swing back to the latter later on, but for now, I'll just say that I enjoyed the Battle of El Alamein and the Rats of Tobruk missions probably the most. I don't know what it was, but these were the missions that I found to be the most interesting. That little section where you're guiding your group through the desert was a nice change of pace, though I will at least say that shooting the plane towards the end of the level kind of sucked. And as for the Battle of El Alamein, I don't know. I just kind of liked how chaotic the battlefield was for this stage with your allies and everyone coming together and going after the enemy. Though I have to admit, I did die a lot more than I'm comfortable saying on this level alone. Gameplay is fine too. Nothing really special here. You can perform different special sort of abilities. For example, Arthur can command the team to suppress targets, and Wade can do this thing that highlights enemies. Nothing really too fancy or worth going into that much detail with. I will say though is that for some reason, I didn't really like the sniper rifles in this game. It's kind of weird because I always liked sniping in Call of Duty, but it feels a little off here. Like aiming and going to shoot again feels sluggish, and I just don't really like it. I think that weapons like the PPSH were a lot better in Vanguard versus World War II, where it felt like the weapon was neutered or something. If I'm gonna point to any guns that I liked in the game, well, maybe the STG would have been my favorite, since I would sometimes find myself going around specifically seeing if I could find one laying on the ground. Outside of the Lee Enfield, which I think I only ever found on like one level, I just couldn't get on with any of the bolt actions in Vanguard. They felt way too slow, and I didn't really care for them, which is kind of a shame because in other games that utilize these things, they feel way smoother and a lot more fun to use. Kind of disappointed here. I'll also add that I thought the game looked fantastic too. Seriously, when you're mostly playing older games and then come to these newer Call of Duties, it's hard to not be impressed. That being said, Vanguard is visually stunning in just about every aspect. The environmental details going straight to things like even the weather or stuff like fire are incredible. It's actually pretty insane at just how good the newer Call of Duty games look. It's crazy because if you go back to the older stuff, they looked fine, but I don't think they were breaking grounds or anything. Whereas this current stuff is like watching a movie. I mean, that's something else with Call of Duty Vanguard. Some of these cutscenes are like 5+ minutes long. I was able to literally sit back and just take these in without doing anything. But on the flip side, I think the game is kind of short too. It took me around 6 hours to finish the campaign, which isn't the worst. But if you consider that there was like 2 hours worth of cutscenes, then that's not really that great. What I can at least praise is that I think most of the performances were okay. I think my favorite character was Lucas Riggs. Really, his sections were the best, and I liked his character and missions way more than the others. I don't know though, everything was okay here otherwise. You got like Laura Bailey and stuff acting. It's fine. But if I'm gonna give praise towards anything, it's the soundtrack. I actually think this game has pretty good music, which isn't anything surprising since it's done by Bear McCreary. Dude's done some good stuff, which includes things like the Walking Dead TV show and the God of War reboot, as well as the sequel Ragnarok. So anyways, if I'm looking for issues I had with the game, well, apart from any weird bugs and floating enemies that I saw, I think the game was mostly okay, albeit a bit underwhelming in a lot of areas, like the gameplay fluidity and whatnot. The most recent Call of Duty games prior to Black Ops 6 tend to not feel that much different from each other all that much, but I'll reinforce what I stated earlier. Something about everything in Vanguard feels slow, like running and reloading and even aiming just feels clunky and not really quick or fluid like what we've seen with previous games. It's not something that I particularly enjoyed either because it kind of seems like a huge step back, especially if I compared it to like Cold War or even Modern Warfare 2019. I'll also add that there was a few really annoying sections in the game as well. I really thought the flying in the game was somehow worse than Call of Duty World War II, which is actually impressive that it could get that bad. It honestly made the mission, the Battle of Midway, feel like one of the worst levels that I've played in any Call of Duty game in recent memory. And I've gone back and played a bunch of them, but this level is pretty damn terrible. terrible. I'm not sure how it is on a controller, but my goodness, it's pretty awful on mouse and keyboard. It almost made me stop playing the game altogether due to how atrocious the mission itself was. I cannot believe this level made it into the final product because wow. Just wow. It's indescribably bad, and I hope to never experience something like this ever again. So overall, I don't really care for Call of Duty Vanguard. Some elements of the story are mostly fine. However, it's kind of a mess, and I guess I just think that there isn't enough here for me to point to and be like, yeah, no, this game isn't as bad as people were acting. I don't like it, and I just don't think it's a very good game. I honestly feel like it's a leap back from World War II, which is impressive in its own right, because I don't think that game was fantastic either, but it had a lot of little things that I at least was able to appreciate about the game itself, whereas this one just feels off. I mean, I'm glad I was finally able to log this one since it was my first time playing it, surprisingly, but I don't think I'd ever go back to this one ever again either. It's just not anything to write home about, and really I think there's way better choices for someone to replay if they want to go back to playing around with the campaigns in these games. Like, this wouldn't be my last choice, but damn if it isn't near the bottom. I think you could definitely do worse, but there's also loads of other Call of Duty entries that are worth going back to far more than this game. I just didn't care for it, and that's all there really is to it. Thank you all for watching. I feel strangely bad about this one. I wanted to like Vanguard, but I just don't. The game feels very and I'm not all that impressed by it. It's weird because I don't dislike Sledgehammer games or anything, but this one is just kind of unremarkable to me. But anyways, if you like the video, please consider liking and subscribing. As always, it helps me out. Also, I just want to know, what's your thoughts on Vanguard? Was there anything that y'all liked about it, or was it just meh? Leave a comment and I'll check it out. But anyways, we'll be back with more soon enough, so stay tuned. Until next time, take care and peace out.